Okay. Hello. Welcome to Bridging Black Love. We are here with a very great segment for you all today. And so it is Bridging Black Love with
Misha,
and Dr. Jacqueline.
and today we will be talking about attachment styles.
And so I'm really excited to introduce our guest with us today. Her name is Ivy McCardle, and she's someone who is very talented, very gifted, very intelligent, and she's also my cousin. So I'm super excited. Ivy, tell us all about you.
About me? Well, let me just tell you. I'll give you the quick spiel about me. So I'm living in Dublin, Ireland. That's where I currently reside. I've been here for almost 3 years. And while my day job is in advertising, my passion really lies with doing therapy, specifically individual, relational, and sex therapy. That's actually what I specialize in. So for me, what I'm doing here is trying to set up a sex therapy practice. And I have to tell you, that's really me in a nutshell. Individual sex therapy, making sure people have the best relationships that they can have is really the ultimate goal.
Awesome.
That's amazing. I remember when you told me and some members of the family you wanted to go into sex therapy, and I was like, "Well, what is that? What does that mean?" That was my just sheltered self before I had my revolution. So now
Exactly.
I get it. I get it. And I appreciate
I still get that question all the time though, so because I hadn't mentioned this before, but so I have a master's degree from Hofstra University in marriage and family therapy, and I also have a master's of education from Widener University, which happens to be the only sex therapy accredited program in the United States. And when I decided to do sex therapy, honestly, what it came down to is completely by accident, and I'm not going to go into details of how it came to pass. Through an old roommate of mine, we were having a conversation about what could you do for the rest of your life that you really enjoy doing. And I said, talking about sex and helping people have better sex lives is ultimately what that came down to. And having better relationships as well. So even now when I tell people here in Ireland, I want to start a sex therapy practice, I get a lot of the conservative looks, oh, we don't need that here, or, well, what is that exactly? So people don't know what it is, but ultimately it's about communication. It's all about helping people communicate better with their partners or within themselves.
Awesome.
that is amazing.
So we'll get into the questions, and I'll start us off. What exactly is attachment styles, and then can you tell us about the different types of attachment styles?
Yeah. So really, to talk about attachment styles, you have to first really talk about attachment theory. And I won't go into the origins or the history or who the creators were of the attachment theory, but just knowing that in a nutshell, attachment theory really is about the bond and relationships between people, specifically in long-term relationships. So whether that be a parent and child or an intimate partnership. So really, my interest lies specifically and more so in terms of adult attachment, because attachment theory really was directed towards the parent-child bond initially. And as we get to be adults, people kind of forget about us, and they're like, oh, you're an adult. You have your whole life sorted and figured out. But we all certainly know that when it comes to relationships and in adulthood, it's just messy. It gets real messy real quick. So so that's what I've seen. So in terms of the specific question that you asked, attachment styles, the research and what you can find in any kind of literature that you read is that there are three main kinds of attachment styles. There's the secure attachment style, anxious, and then avoidant. And just really quickly, I'll just blow through those three and just give you an idea of what they stand for. So when it comes to the secure attachment style, it really is defined as people who feel comfortable with intimacy, and they're usually warm and loving. And please note that there is no such thing as a person who is 100% attachment style based. So, and I know we'll get into some of those questions a little bit later on, but I just want to go ahead and put that out there right now. And then moving on to anxious. So anxious people, they really do crave intimacy, and often they're very preoccupied with their relationships. They tend to worry about their partner's ability to love them back. So that creates that anxiety within themselves. And then lastly, there's that avoidant style. So the avoidant attachment style, it's people, they equate intimacy with a loss of their autonomy and their independence. And they're constantly trying to close that closeness and minimize being close with someone. So those are the attachment styles in a nutshell.
Wow.
just before we go on to the next question and talk about these things, what you keyed in on was the fact that, really what you do with, because you're a marriage and you're, I don't want to get it wrong, a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah.
And so, and like you said, as far as sex therapy goes, and a lot of people really shun away from that, especially in conservative, culture and things like that. But what you said was communication. And so that's really what I took away from, really what you do. And that's a lot of things, like you said, as adults, we really don't think that it's, we don't look at that and how important it is to communicate when you're in a relationship. And even if it's not like, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend relationships, even friends. And like you said, it started with children, but it really manifests with communication. So
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, and just to clarify that really quickly. So, everybody communicates, right? So the difference about when we're talking about communication within a therapeutic relationship, or whatever you want to call it, is the difference between effective communication versus ineffective communication, right? Because I can yell and I can scream at you and we're communicating, doesn't mean that you're responding well to what I'm saying, doesn't mean we're getting anywhere in the conversation. And it's also being able to have the security with that partner to be able to tell them, this is what's going on with me, without feeling as though what you're saying is being diminished or in any way. So it's really about effective communication. I just want to make sure that, everybody knows that that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it is, I think, I tend to think about communication and how it shows up, like tone and body language, etc. And I don't think we often think about why, what's at the base of how I communicate with people is the reason why I'm having struggles with a particular person in our communication. So yeah, absolutely is about relationships and communication. Now, do you think that people are capable of multiple attachment styles? I know you kind of started to hit on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we definitely are able to hold multiple attachment styles within ourselves at a single point in time. So the way that you can look at it is from one of two different ways. You can look at it from the pure attachment theory, which is all about, like, again, child parental bonds and caregivers, right? And caregivers, how they treat you when you're growing up and when you're a little toddler or a baby, and how they respond to you when you're in need of something. So from that perspective, if you're a child and you're seeing that your parents treat certain groups of people or certain people, they talk to them a different way, or they talk to, their partner a certain way, and they talk to someone else in the family a different way, you can definitely adopt that for yourself as you get older, and you can change. Not that you really think about it consciously, it becomes a very unconscious kind of thing that you're not really aware of, but you can kind of adapt to whomever you're with in terms of a different attachment style. So how I would be with my cousin, is not the way I'd be with my parents. And the way that I'd be with my parents isn't the way that I am with my partner's parents, or even how I'm with my partner himself. So I do think it's possible. And I think that, just to put a disclaimer on that, and I know again, we're going to get into this, but no one's really bound to one kind of attachment style at all throughout their entire life, right? So just because you happen to be avoidant doesn't mean you'll always be avoidant. It doesn't mean that you'll always be secure if you're secure. So that's something that people don't get wrapped up in thinking, well, this is who I am, this is who I'm always going to be, therefore, I have to settle on this as a person other than myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad that you touched on that, because sometimes we get so caught up in who we are. Just like I see people, this is, totally off topic, but people are like, well, my zodiac says, and so I'm this way. And I'm like, you don't have to be that way. You can make a conscious decision to be a different way if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I have a lot of random mantras in my head, and, happiness is a choice that people can have. People don't think that you can choose to be a certain way, but you can. You're a human being. You have a mind, and if you have a will and you have a desire to be a different kind of person, or you want to attract a different kind of person to yourself, then be aware of it. I think awareness is really what it comes down to. When I started looking at and getting really into the idea of attachment for adults, attachment theory for adults, attachment styles, I started reading all this different literature and some research. And I found myself getting really upset with myself, because it's not off topic, but it's completely overshare. As my cousin knows, I'm getting divorced this year. So I bring that up because it does really play into this. I'm reading this literature and I'm thinking about my relationship with him, and I'm looking at it and looking at that relationship and seeing all these things. I'm kind of like, why did I not know about this or think about this before? I wasn't even really consciously or actively or proactively seeking what kind of person I am in this relationship. I kind of was just going with it, and I feel like he was just going with it too, and it just obviously didn't work out. And then here I am in this new relationship with someone else who, whereas I would say my husband would be more avoidant, and with him I was very anxious, and I realize that now in retrospect. But then my new partner, who is surprisingly secure, considering his age, surprisingly secure. And I went into that relationship still quite anxious, and I had to do a lot of kind of soul searching to be like, okay, why am I behaving this way? Why am I trying to kind of stir him up? Why do I need drama? Do you know what I mean? Because drama in my mind in that past relationship was drama equals excitement. It equals love in some way, when in reality, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
People think boredom or people think calm equals boring. Give me boring. Give me boring any minute of the day. Give me calm and boring over that nonsense. Do you know what I mean? But the thing is, I had to sit down and sit with myself and look at myself and say, what do I want? This is a relationship I'm in now. Who do I want to be in this relationship? And it wasn't a matter of, do I want to be somebody different? It's just, do I want to be emotionally present in that moment in a way that is, again, having effective communication with my current partner.
You brought up, you touched on a really, really interesting point when you said that. I've met your ex-husband, heard a lot about the new partner. And, for me, I always tell people that the best relationship that I had was when I was younger, about 20 years ago. And everybody said, well, how did you know that you loved him? How did you know? And it was very easy, because it was calm and it was secure. And that was the most secure I'd ever felt in my life, outside of my mother, outside of my family. And I wasn't anxious. It wasn't about me always being like, oh, he's out there cheating, or I have to do this, or I have to act crazy, or we're going to roll up on him. We're going to put on black and, we're going to roll up on him. And it never felt like that. And it's been I'm not going to say a struggle, but I haven't felt a lot of that sense. And that really, so I do feel like a lot of times I go into these anxious cycles with people, and it's like, I don't want drama. I really want something that feels safe and secure. And so,
Yeah, I think that also brought up a good point for me when you mentioned how you were one way with one partner and realized that he was, a particular attachment style. And then you get with a new partner who's a different attachment style, but yet you kind of started to bring in that anxious attachment style with you. And I think about how I kind of show up in relationships too. And I realized that I've spent a lot of time being anxiously attached in my romantic relationships, and it takes a particular set of circumstances for me to be in a secure attachment pattern with a partner. And so if you could hit a little bit more on that and how we kind of show up differently based on conditions or the attachment style of our partner.
I think that's a really good question, because I think that I've always been anxious and didn't know it. Always that little bit of kind of insecurity in the back of my mind of, like Jackie was just saying, well, what's he doing? Or why isn't he called? Or why isn't he messaging? Or all this kind of self-created delusions in my mind, even though nothing was going on. And so I was carrying around that anxious piece for a very long time. And I'd say I didn't realize that my husband was avoidant until probably, so I started doing this research and really looking at it from that perspective. And seeing that, thinking about it and really reflecting on it, I'm like, we probably just should never have gotten married, quite frankly. But we all learn as we grow. Yes, and it's not, and I don't regret anything. I'm actually glad that I did marry him. But the thing is, to address your statement, your question there. So the new relationship that I am in, because he is in such a secure place and he's very much secure in who he is, I have become a lot more secure now. And that's that feed that you can get from someone else. So attachment styles can influence each other.
Mm-hmm.
And secure, so for example, a secure person can, if you're with a secure person and you happen to be anxious, they can actually bring you up to be a more
Yeah.
secure person. Not person, but secure attachment style. And so I found now that I am a lot calmer and I don't stress out about anything when it comes to the relationship. It's just like, okay, this is what it's meant to be. This is how it's supposed to be. So I think that you can get very wrapped up in different attachment styles, and they do influence each other. I think having a sense of awareness that you're getting pulled into something that you might not feel comfortable with, that becomes the issue. If you don't have the awareness and then all of a sudden now we're sitting here fighting all the time, or we don't even want to talk to each other at all because we want to deal, that's when you have to take a step back and say, okay, either we need to figure out how we're going to relate to one another on that emotional level to where we both feel secure, we're not raging against each other, or just kind of say, I have to walk away. And the thing is, secure people who have secure attachment, they actually are like, no, I'm done. I'm going to walk away. They give it some time and then they're like, well, I'm done. And that's the difference. Like a lot of people will hold on waiting for something different to happen, even though nothing is changing. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, yeah, at the core of it, it's that piece of self-awareness, but also it is, you can be influenced by someone else's attachment style.
Great.
Yeah.
We have a question here, but I think you kind of hit on it already in a previous response, but maybe you can elaborate. So, do you think how you were treated by your caregivers kind of shaped the foundation for your attachment style throughout life?
See, I love this question because I have really pondered this question a lot. And the short of it, this is completely in my opinion, and the research does differ, but I would say yes and no. So a lot of it is, and I'm thinking of the extremes, okay? Just because your parents, are caring and loving doesn't mean that you're going to end up being a person with a secure attachment style. Because there are so many other factors in your life that contribute to your attachment style. It's your genes, it's the romantic experiences that you've had in the past. I mean, it could even be the friendships that you've had that have impacted, what your attachment style is. So I think yes and no, because you could also be a person who's horribly abused by your parents, and then you can have an avoidant attachment style based on that. And that would have been, and those kind of caregivers would have given you that foundation of being avoidant or being anxious or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a yes and a no. I think there's almost too much of a focus on caregivers when it comes to adult attachment theory. I think that for kids or babies and all that, it makes complete sense because they don't have the wherewithal. All they have is the sphere of their immediate family. And that is where their influence of attachment style is coming from. But as you get older, you are just having so many experiences that are impacting who you are as a human being. And I am glad that I'm not who I was when I was 17 or 25 or 32. I've learned so much along the way. So, I mean, that's just how it is, I feel like. So I think it's a yes and a no on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. And, when we're going through questions and things like that, this is something that was really, for me, really poignant because I think about this, I'm in the midst, for a long time I was in a sandwich generation, having very, very, very young children and caregiving for a parent who was young, but was very sick and health was declining. And so when I was in New York, when we were in New York together, cousin, and, I was about 25, 26, I started looking at how my upbringing reflected my relationship choices. And so for me, I noticed that I was brought up in a very secure way. My mother was very giving, she was very loving, but she wasn't exactly that nurturing. And also too, I remember having some of the things that are within me, because I have different kind of attachment styles, were just some of the things that she said, especially about men and things that I heard about men. And I carried that in, and I have some of those attachment styles. So when people are coming in, and I know that, different things shape who we are, of course, trauma shapes who we are, life shapes who we are. But if someone is coming in and they're like, you know what, there's something that, my parents used to hit me when I was a kid. And now I'm so, I gravitate towards people who are just so nice and so friendly, but we don't really deal with conflict. I can't deal with conflict. How do you get somebody to open up about that, to be open to having these difficult conversations, but in an effective and healthy way?
I mean, that's really difficult because it depends on the people who are having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The when it comes to, let's say, the conflict avoidance, for example, I just brought up, you could have one person who wants to talk about it, who wants to say, you know what, I don't like what you did, for example. And that person could be on the instant defense. And then it becomes well, you did this and you did that. It doesn't even, it gets you nowhere because nothing ever gets resolved. So developing effective communication also means being able to close your mouth and listen to what somebody says and respect what they say. But it's also a matter of how that person talks to you. Because there is a way to tell someone that they've hurt you without hurting them in the process, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Complete sense. That makes complete sense. And that goes to what Alicia said. It's not sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
How you say it. No.
What you say it.
Spot on.
The intention behind what you said.
Right. But I gotta tell you, if you've not been raised in that way, to communicate in that way, how are you gonna learn it?
Right.
How are you gonna learn that way? The way that you're talking isn't that's the way that you should be speaking. And also, don't forget this, when you're in an intimate partnership, a relationship, your expectations of a relationship are probably based on how you were raised. And I wasn't you just have differences. I was raised differently than my ex-husband, who was from Ireland. Different culture altogether. And my expectation going into it was based on what I saw from my parents growing up and from his parents growing up. And those sometimes can collide, even though our parents are actually surprisingly very much alike. But I think it's just us. But anyway, I think that there has to be that level of respect for one another to say, I don't like the way that we talk to one another when we argue. There is a healthy way to argue or resolve conflict. There's a healthy way to talk about sex. There's a healthy way to talk about pretty much anything. If the people involved in that conversation are willing to listen and the other person is willing to explain it in a way that is not accusatory. It took me a long time to learn those things.
Yeah. So I think you brought up a good point that kind of took me back to a previous question or a previous explanation of kind of how attachment styles change over time. And I think a lot of us tend to think about how our attachment style was shaped based on how our parents loved us. And I think you hit on a good point because, whereas I feel like I was very much so doted over and loved by my parents, they had a very chaotic interaction and style with each other that I think shaped my attachment style more than the love that I got from them directly. Yeah, that was a very interesting point about understanding those styles.
I think that's a really good, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a really significant aspect that I don't think people think about. And I think it kind of nailed it. Like your parents loved you, doted on you, you felt secure, you felt cared for, but their relationship was tumultuous. And I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because honestly, that happens in a lot of situations, but ultimately what you're watching are two people who you care for, who are raising you, who can't seem to manage each other, who can't seem to show care and love for one another. You know what I mean? So, and there are some people who thrive on that. There's relationships that thrive on chaos. They can't function without chaos.
Bobby and Whitney. That's the first game.
I get to avoid that.
And just going back to that point of changing over time, I actually found a stat before we started this the call here, and the stat that I saw was about 70 to 75% of adults remain consistently in the same attachment category. at different points in their lives. While the remaining percent of the population, they actually said that they do change their attachment style. So they do report having an actual change as opposed to staying consistent. And that's only what the people who report a change of style is only what 25-30% of people.
Wow.
So exactly, right? You know, that 70% is like people stick in it. I don't think there's the awareness. There's not the awareness of it, and of knowing, like when you're in a relationship, you want everything to be perfect and wonderful, you know. But then what's perfect and what's wonderful to one person might not be perfect and wonderful to another person. But it's like you want to be able to not have any kind of chaos for the most part. You want to be able to hang out and spend time together. Some people want to get lost in a relationship. They want to lose their autonomy. They want to be all, sorry, I'm going to say this to your lovely fans out there, but they want to be completed. Great. That's what you want. Go for it. I hope that you find that completion is within yourself. But, you know, it's just one of those things where you've got this idea that people being consistent and never really having the awareness, and maybe they don't need the awareness. Maybe they're happy where they are. But I think that percentage is just really interesting that people, not many people change their attachment style. They pretty much stay the same.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about, so attachment styles, it kind of reminds me of the conversation about love languages and how we kind of compare and contrast one over the other. Can you kind of speak to, like, is there a ideal attachment style? And if you're not that attachment style, then you're not healthy in your relationships, or can there be a healthy balance in any of those attachment styles?
So again, the literature that I've read is basically like there are bad combinations of attachments.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, what the aim is to be in a secure attachment style. Okay. You know, you want to know that your partner is there for you and in a supportive way if you're having a great day or you're having a not so great day. So ultimately, that's what it's not. I wouldn't say it's a goal. It's just a statement. It is one of the attachment styles, and you know, you can strive for it or not. It's entirely up to you. Some people like to be avoidant. That's fine, but most times what you see is people who are secure are not in the dating pool very often because they're secure. They don't need to be. They actually find someone who works well for them, and they don't leave those people. And then you have avoidant people who dip in, dip out, for the most part also are not really in there either because they don't really want the intimacy. And you find that anxious and avoidance typically pair up a lot. And what I also read, and don't hold true to, who knows, you know, stats can be disproven easily as they can be proven. They find that women who are anxious are very attracted to men who are avoidant if you're doing a heterosexual exchange.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally, I see that. Oh, I definitely.
All over the place. That was me. That was my whole thing.
Yeah, girl. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that, the thing about it is that you can, if you don't like the attachment style that you're not stuck or bound to it. You can change it as long as you know what you're doing that is promoting you being anxious and you're aware of it. You know, the idea of, I'll use myself as an example because quite frankly, I don't want to use anybody else and I don't mind oversharing a little bit, but I think about myself in terms of first dating somebody. And I'm kind of like, so I've got an American friend here. She's married. I've got an Irish friend. They're my two close friends, an Irish friend here as well. She's been with her partner for just as long as the married couple. So about 12 years. Both couples have been together for about 12 years. I mean, I was like freaking out. Why isn't he called? What's going on? Like what, like, you know, just in my head about all the nonsense. Right. And then a little of you creeps in to try to like make them jealous, because if you make them jealous, then that shows they care about you. Right. American friend is supporting everything I'm doing. She's like, yes, that's right. Why is he not doing this? Now this actually goes into, I think you have a question about culture and universal attachment styles being cultural, universal. Irish friends said, what is wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Like, why are you acting crazy? You know that this person likes you. Why don't you just calm down? Shut up. And the funny thing is, the Irish maid of mine, she is totally and completely correct. She was like, stop freaking out. I don't understand why you're acting this way. She had, from a cultural standpoint, she literally had no idea. Right. So I think one of the questions you had again was, is attachment cultural or universal? And I think this is an interesting one. I haven't seen anything that specifically ties them together that says, there is a difference between them. But anecdotally, I feel like there is. Because just the difference of how my two friends responded to my reaction to this person, it was just so fundamentally different. Yeah. So I don't know.
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
And I wonder if that has more to do with how people interact with each other versus how they were raised, like, how they were nurtured.
That's a really good point, though.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good point, because since you don't know who they are, I can just tell you. So my American friend, she, loving parents, but a bit tumultuous because their mother had a bit of like kind of a mental, she's working on her mental health, let's put it that way.
Okay.
Whereas my Irish friend, she grew up, she's one of the youngest, but the family is kind of a very combined family where she's got, a few half siblings and step siblings, and her father, who's now passed away, doted on her because she was the youngest. And her parents were very loving towards one another before he passed. So it's interesting that she, that pulls in that question, that point that you just made of, is it a cultural thing or is it how they were raised within the culture that they lived in? And so my reaction to things is, when I tell my American friends, they are consistently the same. They all agree they were like, yes, you're right. He should have done this. My Irish friends all completely disagree. They just are like, you're acting insane. This must be some weird American thing. We don't get it.
It is. Probably is.
I can say for, the people that I know, because I have friends from all different, I'm so sorry, you guys. I have friends of all different cultures and ethnicities and all kinds of things. But I do have, I've noticed different things, like my friend who is in South Africa, he is just like very go with the flow. His parents have been together for like 1,000 years. And so everybody in his family is partnered except for him, but he's a very secure, like, attachment style. And then I've noticed my friend who is her family's from Ecuador, although she's from the United States. And it's just like everybody is partnered in her family, and that's just what it is. And you're together till you die. And so it's just a very different way in the way that they were raised. And even when she was thinking about dating somebody, the whole family was like, no, he's not right for you. And they all intervened. They stepped in and intervened on her behalf.
Wow.
And we were like, no, you should be with somebody else who is whatever. But I do think it goes to nature versus nurture in some situations, and definitely culture. Some cultures believe that this is what you should do. This is what you should look for in a person. And they're going to support you as a culture and as a community.
Yeah.
I know for myself as an African-American woman, there wasn't necessarily, I came from a very anxious and avoidant, lifestyle. So it's very different than some other people that I've experienced in other cultures. And I was very much, nurtured in ways. But I do think that cultures are different, and we notice it. And even when people say ridiculous things, that makes me upset on the internet. I don't know who gave these people the internet, because they just can't say anything on the internet. But, when people are like, well, I can't date this type of person, and they'll, spew out a color or a race or ethnicity. And they'll be like, they're not this, they're not loving, they're not kind, they're not gracious, they're loud, they're obnoxious, And I do think culture sometimes does play a factor in some of these things.
I think so.
Absolutely.
It's a good takeaway for me to look into, though, because I think that is a really, really good question and a good point of is it universal, is it cultural, and how much of those factors come into play. Where were you when I was trying to get my PhD?
If you're talking to me, I was here, honey. I was here. I'm here for you, girl. I'm ready. You tell me, I'm coming to lay.
Don't even get me started about this PhD. I had this conversation earlier today. I can't be bothered anymore.
You tell me, honey, I'm ready to lay on the couch. I need some good.
I'm ready. I just might go and get my philosophy PhD. Who knows? I'm all over the place over here.
If you need,
education is never a waste. I'm always loving to spend more money on education.
It's a vicious cycle, I tell you.
It's just cycle.
It is.
Anyway.
girl.
Okay. So, would you say that learning attachment theory is helpful, helpful to spouses, love partners, friends, and therapists? And how can we apply it to those relationships?
So I think that, like I just said, education is never a waste. So if you want to learn more about anything, go for it. Do I think yes, therapists should learn about attachment styles. They need to I think that we should, as therapists, learn about attachment theory. It isn't something that I would personally bring up to a client in a session. It's just something I would keep in the back of my mind in terms of who this person is when they're experiencing relationship difficulties. I might think about that. And maybe along the lines, maybe down the line, we would have that conversation, but it really is a tool for me as a therapist for me to gauge, okay, what's happening in a relationship? What's one of the reasons that, they could be having like issues? Do you know what I mean? In terms of love partners or friends or spouses, I think that learning the attachment styles is great and useful for your intimate partnership that you might have. Don't think friends necessarily need to. Your friend's a friend. You know what I mean? If a friend makes a mistake, the mistake remains a mistake, right? But the friend remains a friend. So I would say that that's not really relevant for them. But I think back to the spouses or intimate partners, I think that it's useful for self. Does that make sense? Like, when I started getting into it and looking into adult attachment, it made me so hyper aware of the places that I was neglecting within myself when it comes to relationship, how I let myself down in terms of being a better partner. And, I honestly wish that I had thought more about it, prior to getting married. But like I said, I don't regret getting married, but we could have had a way better marriage if one of us had taken some time to stop being stubborn. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And taken some time to listen. So I think it's useful in that regard of your own personal self-discovery, your own personal self-journey, especially when you're in a relationship, a new relationship, and more specifically to say, okay, who am I and who is this person? Also, for new relationships, it's great to have a sense of the attachment style so you can say, this person has red flags and this is not going to work. Don't want to waste my time. And don't get wrapped up in the chemistry of being in love with someone. It only lasts for 2 years. That idea, 2 years. 2 years is all you get from that in love feeling. So relationships take work, they take time. And I think that people need to respect that they take work and that they take time. And people also need to understand themselves a little bit better. And I think that's where attachment theory and attachment style come into place. Like, I think that everyone should just take a step back and say, who am I in this relationship that I'm getting into? Who is this person?
And can I just jump in there really, really quick?
Yes, you can. Are you all right?
I'm gonna make it through. But me and this eye are gonna make it through. But I did want to jump in there just really, really quick. I know that you said as far as friendships go, attachment style really isn't that important, and that's great. But I tend to differ.
Okay, tell me more. Go on.
I'll tell you more about it. Because friendships are really, really important to me. Like, they're very important to me personally. And so when I call somebody a friend, you are a friend. Okay. It's of utmost importance to me. And I actually feel like I gravitate towards friendships more than I do relationships, with, men. And so when I've had people that come in my life and I think they're awesome, I think they're great. And then, they can have some of these anxious and avoidant, attachment styles. And it just doesn't work for me all the time. And there's different things. And I've even heard things about myself as a friend, as we've gotten older and people are learning to communicate and use their voice. There's things that I've heard about myself that aren't so pretty. I'd be like, I'm perfect. But I realize that I'm not. But with friendships, it's really hard. And when I have people who are really, dismissive, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't have a conversation with them. They do not take accountability. You almost think that they are almost like a sociopath, not a psychopath, a sociopath, a narcissist.
Yeah.
I hate everybody's using narcissism in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have these anxious and avoidant kind of relationship with your friends, that can also impact the relationship that you have with them. If you have a friend that cannot take accountability, a friend who was was raised in a household where there was competition, a household where there was just insanity, household where there was nothing but survival, they bring that to your friendship, and that's their attachment style, and that may not work for you.
So can I ask you a question? Let me ask you, why would this person be a friend?
No, there's sometimes you get to know people, like you said, the chemistry takes 2 years. Okay. Chemistry takes 2 years.
Well, that's an intimate partnership. So let me give you an example. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm not saying like your view is your view and you're not wrong. So my thing is this. So let me give you an example. So being here, actually even living in New York and living here, for example. In New York, as you know, you'll go to brunch, you'll meet people, you'll exchange numbers. You never hear from them again. Right? And same thing happened here, right? So in Dublin. So I was talking to these lovely young people who I'd met at a pub or whatever, exchanged numbers, give them text message, how you doing? You want to hang out sometime? Don't hear from like, oh yeah, we'll get together. Never hear from them again, right? And for me, the thing about friendship is this, like, if we were going to be friends, then there'd be effort on both sides. It wouldn't be a one-sided thing. So to me, when it comes to friendships, if we're going to break this down between like intimate partnerships, attachment styles, and this goes back to that first question, okay, or one of those earlier questions of can you have multiple styles, right? Multiple attachment styles. Intimate partnerships versus friend relationships, right? If anybody is dismissive to me, when I just meet you, if you put no effort into it, then we're not going to be friends unless you reach out as well. That's fine. Not a big deal. I don't mind it. Quite frankly, I don't care. I've had friends who I've known for 30 years now. And I knew a particular person whose name I won't use because you actually do know her, cousin.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We were friends for a very long time. And I noticed that this person was, every time you talk to this person, it was always about her all the time. And at this point, I'd known her for like 10 plus years. Always about her. Whenever you answer that phone, you know it's going to be about a failed relationship that she's had. It's never going to be, how are you doing today? Right? So it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm done with this chick. I don't want to talk to her anymore. I'd literally known her for like 15 years. And I'm like, I'm done. Got on the phone with her. And I told her flat out, I said, listen, I'm not a good friend to you. I talk behind your back about you, and the fact that your relationship, every time I talk to you, it's about you and your failed relationships. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in hearing about it because it's the same stuff over and over and over again with you. It's never anything new, and it's just uninteresting, and I'm bored with it. And I said, I think we're done here. I'm a toxic friend to you, and I don't want you in my life anymore. And I would hope that you wouldn't want me in your life because I told you I'm being a toxic friend. Didn't speak to her for probably about 5 years after that. Now we reconciled. It's all good. The fact remains, like, bringing up your point of, going down the line years, and then you realize this person is not who you think they are, or they're avoidant, or they're anxious, or whatever. So I guess to your point there, Jackie, then yes, like, it is good to have that sense of how your friends work. But I would imagine that your communication is very different with your friends than it would be with an intimate partner. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. But I'm just saying, like, for me, like, there's friends, because I'm learning, I'm evolving, I'm constantly growing as a human. And there's a lot of things that I'm seeing about myself. And that's really where it is for me, is my self-worth and working on myself and seeing how I relate to people. Because honestly, I don't want to be alone forever. But we do bring certain things into situations. And yes, I'm different but I'm not that different with intimate partners. No, I am, because I don't give any slack to any man. Like, I just be like, next.
Right.
There's always somebody waiting. There's always somebody in the inbox. It's fine. So that's why friendships are so important. But so, and learning about myself, I'm realizing how I relate to people. And I'm also realizing what I no longer value and want to hold. And like you said, I'm realizing after 15 years of friendship, this person wasn't your cup of tea anymore. And that's
Mhm.
okay. And we realize that even in relationships. I've been with somebody long term, and then I was like,
Right.
this
Right.
is not gonna work. We're not gonna make it.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
do therapy till we're blue in the face. We're not gonna make it. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
that's just what I wanted to talk about, and just
No, that's a good point. It's a good point, though.
yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with Jackie too. When you were saying that about friendships, I was thinking I kind of do think that it impacts
Mm-hmm.
friendships quite a bit. And also I feel like I'm very consistent in my attachment style with my friends and with my romantic partners, but I think I'm more forgiving long term with my friends. So I kind of allow them to grow and change and evolve over time. And I just kind of pull back a little bit, but give up. I don't give up on them. I just kind of like passively participate in that friendship. So it's interesting to think about it, kind of how my anxious attachment shows up in my romantic relationships, and how it also shows up in my friendships. Because if you avoid conflict and you're anxious about how you'll be responded to or received from people in general, that style kind of shows up across the board, I think.
I think I mean, this is an interesting, because I hadn't really thought about the friend aspect, just because the research really wasn't focused on friendship based. It's really focused on that parent, child, and long-term like intimate partnerships. So I think it's an interesting way to look at it from that lens of platonic long-term friendships, right?
Yeah.
So, and I guess from my perspective, and I mean, friendship in general is just not studied enough, quite frankly, because I think people kind of dismiss it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
again, where were you, Misha, during my PhD? Like, when were you? Why were we hanging out? Come on now. I love you, Dr. Cousin, but Jesus. Anyway, but like that aspect of friendship, I never really thought much about it, because if I'm giving that example of the person I was talking about, who I was a toxic friend to,
Mm-hmm.
she was extremely anxious, not in her friendships, but in her intimate partnerships, intimate
Mm-hmm.
relationships. And I guess when I think about it from that standpoint of friendship, I guess for me, I give my friends a lot of leeway, but I typically don't really have to, because I don't see them in that way. And like, it took me a long time to even cut that friend out of my life. Like, it was a good 15 years before I was like, okay, now I'm done. Right. But that took a lot. And it kept being the same thing over and over again. It was so repetitive and redundant, I couldn't take it anymore. But I would say for the most part, most of my friends, they're pretty even keel.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very core group of friends who, I guess I've never thought about it from that perspective, that lens of attachment style when it comes to friends, because I've known them all for so long, or I get very close to them here in Ireland, and just those issues don't seem to appear in that they don't manifest in that same way, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's
and I think that they're like, for me, my friendships are very intimate. Like I get more. I know people like to think intimacy is sex, but I don't have sex with my with my good female friends. But I feel like they know me more intimately than probably 60% of the men I've dated. So those relationships are probably more intimate than a lot of my romantic relationships have been. Yeah. So
that's a really good point, and it's a valid one, quite frankly, because you're right. I mean, I would say that prior to my current partner, I would say most of my intimate, like the core of my intimate, like really deep, meaningful relationships were with my friends, and my best friends are gay Mexican, so I tell them everything. But but you know what I mean? You're absolutely right, because you do have a level of intimacy with your friends that some people, I guess, I'll speak for myself, that I definitely wouldn't have had prior to this current partner that I have now.
Right. And that's exactly why, and that's why, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Okay.
And being here typing too, writing a book.
I'm writing a novel. I'm sharing all this. No, and that's why I brought it up, because I know that, I was reading attachment styles and when it started in the 60s and all of those kind of things. And for me, it's just so many different facets to it. And like I said, I'm, really trying to see how it is. And that's why I brought up about friendship, is because that is such an important aspect of my life. And that's how I relate to people. And and I'm trying to figure out why, want to relate well to other people as well. So.
Yeah, but relating to other people, relating to your friends or relating to other people?
No. That's a whole nother story. We're gonna have to. We don't even want to get off of the. We don't. We're gonna get off topic.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, attachment styles. We're gonna stick with that today.
Right then, we'll stick with that. We'll stick with that for now. All right.
So that's kind of it for our structured questions. Is there anything else you want to say or add about attachment styles or this conversation that we've had?
I think that y'all have really touched on such good points in your questions, but also just the free-flowing conversation has been really, really good in terms of bringing to light things I personally hadn't thought about it from this perspective before. So I thank the both of you for that. But yeah, I think that, I ultimately, listen, when it comes to any kind of relationship, friendship or otherwise, you got to know who you are. You got to know who you are. You got to know how you want to treat other people. You want to know how you want to be treated. I think that when it comes to friendships, I think it is a little bit easier just because that is, to your point, Misha, it is more intimate in that way because you do share more with your friends than you probably would with your partner. And I also think that, the key takeaways for me when it came to looking at attachment really was, you can change. Everybody changes. It's not just one thing that's going to make you secure or avoidant or anxious, and that you can change if you don't like the attachment style that you are. You can change it. So yeah, it's adult attachment is so interesting just because people just think that we're all good and we're self-evolved and we've got our we have our acts together, and in reality we really don't.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
Jeez, I wish. Yeah. 43 and still learning every day. So you have any other questions for me?
I don't. I just want to say thank you for coming here, coming on here, and I'm glad that we finally were able to do this, and I appreciate you taking the time all the way out in Ireland to, really, come here and share this space with us, because that is really, really important, and I'm excited for everybody in the group to hear about it, and, I'd love to have you back to talk about some other things, because there's a lot more to talk about.
No, thank y'all both for inviting me on, and I have to say, you two are killing it, like absolutely loving and admiring what y'all are doing and putting this out there. I think it's fantastic. Keep doing everything you're doing. I just know it's going to get amazingly bigger by the day, and that eventually you'll be picked up and be sold for millions of dollars.
Thank you. Manifest all of that.
Manifest that. Hold on, let me pray about that.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, though. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
You too. Bye.